Thank you for joining us for another episode of Unboxed. Today I have Jen Carlile, the co-founder of Flux, which is a data exchange and collaboration platform for structural designing. Jen, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm really excited to see your presentation. Afterwards, we're going to have a little question and answer session, and we're going to be joined by Ted Hogan, who is a part of Adrian Smith and Gordon Gill Architecture. So let's look forward to that as well. But I'm not going to take the spotlight anymore. Jen, I'm going to have you take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you. So hi, my name is Jen Carlile, and I'm a co-founder and engineering lead at Flux. Flux is a startup in San Francisco, and we're building an open platform for the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. We got our start at Google X, Google's moonshot research lab, and spun out into an independent company in 2012. So we're a mixture of software engineers, AEC professionals, product designers, business folks, and we believe that technology and the smart use of data can dramatically improve how we design and build buildings. So today I want to show you the Flux Platform. The foundations of our platform are data exchange, interoperability, and collaboration. We recognize that building projects are incredibly complex, often with dozens, sometimes hundreds of people and dozens of tools, and it takes a lot of energy and time to keep everyone and everything in sync, and Flux can make that much easier. So for the next few minutes, I want to demonstrate one of the many workflows that Flux can help you with. We actually hosted a happy hour and invited folks from the AEC community in San Francisco into our office a few weeks back, and this is a mashup of some of the stories that I heard from them. So imagine for a minute that I'm an architect, and I'm starting a project in my hometown of San Francisco. So the first thing I'd like to do is understand the context of my site, so neighboring buildings, roads, and parks. So I can go to the Flux site extractor and do just that. So I'm going to enter in my address, which is 10 South Van Ness in San Francisco. And then the app takes me there, and I can position this window to indicate what part of the map I'm interested in. So then I can indicate what I want to pull down. So I'm going to pull in building footprints, building models, topography, contour lines, etc. I'm going to select my Flux project called Van Ness, San Francisco, and then I'm going to click Send to Flux. And then what's happening under the hood with this app is it's talking to OpenStreetMaps, which is an open mapping project supported by the community. Go ahead and send it, and depending on your internet connection, this could take anywhere from a couple seconds to a minute, just depending on your connection. So here we'll give it a chance to talk to OpenStreetMaps and send. And success, so now this data lives in Flux. So you can think of Flux kind of like an online data repository that you can access from your favorite design tools like Grasshopper and Revit, Dynamo, SketchUp, and Excel. And in not too long, we have plugins coming for AutoCAD, 3ds Max, and Google Sheets. So let's go over to Flux. And so what I'm showing here is the Flux project page. This lists all of your active Flux projects. And I can select the one I'm interested in, which is Van Ness, San Francisco. And I'm taken to a page called the Dataview Page. This allows you to inspect and audit your data that you're storing in Flux. So over here on the left, I have a list of what are called data keys. These are each individual bits of data. And then I can drag them onto the canvas to actually inspect what the contents are. So I just added my building footprints. I can overlay roads. And let's add contour lines. And why don't we add on the actual buildings that we sent. Okay, and that's looking good. You can see the roads in green, the contour lines in blue, the buildings in red. So that's looking good. Okay, so now that I have my site context data, I can start roughing out a building. So one of my favorite tools for early stage design is SketchUp. So I'm going to start there. So I'm going to go over to SketchUp, and I'm going to pull in the data that I just sent up to Flux from the site extractor. So I say, receive from Flux. I'll pull down my building footprints. Click receive. That's good. And then I will also pull down my actual buildings. Great. Now if I zoom out and move this around, you can see that I just pulled in all that data that I got from the site extractor into SketchUp. So I could also pull in the other data I sent, like roads and parks and contour lines, but this is enough for me to get started. So if I zoom in, this here is the parcel that I'm interested in, and I'm going to go ahead and design a really simple building. I'm going to just use the built-in polygon tool for SketchUp, and then I'm going to loft the building up. I'm going to make it 80 meters tall. I'm going to zoom out and look at it in context. Yeah, that looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and send it to Flux. So I just select the building, and I say to Flux, select my project, and I created a key earlier called massing, but I also could have created it here from the plugin in SketchUp. And now that data lives in Flux as well. So if I switch back to Flux, I can view my building that I just created here, which is great, but actually it's a little more interesting if I look at it in context. So there we have the building I just designed in yellow against the buildings that I pulled in from the site extractor in red. Okay, so now that I have a rough draft, I want to share this with my colleague. Like I mentioned before, collaboration is one of the kind of cornerstones of the Flux platform, and so it's really a first-class citizen. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share this with my colleague, Anthony. Anthony at flux.io. And I'm going to invite him as an editor. I could also invite him as a project administrator or a viewer if I didn't want him to be able to change any of this data, but I'll leave him as an editor and I'll invite him, save my changes, and now he has access to all of the data that I'm storing in Flux for this project. So like I mentioned before, my favorite tool is SketchUp, but I know that Anthony really likes to use Revit. So in the past, it's been pretty hard to fluidly move between SketchUp and Revit, but now with Flux, it's pretty easy. So one thing I wanted to mention too is just back to collaboration that I forgot to mention. Flux makes it very easy to collaborate across firm boundaries, not just within your firm. Anybody with an email address can create a Flux account, and when you share a project with somebody, if they don't yet have a Flux account, we'll automatically create it for them and let them know through their email. But back to the demo. Like I mentioned before, Anthony likes to use Revit, and so what I want to do is send this building model that I just designed to him in Revit. And I could send this whole building volume, but what would actually be more useful to him is if I can take this building volume and slice it at regular intervals and make them into something that Revit can understand, that these are floor plates, not just a rough building. So I can do that in Flux using a tool we have called the Flow. The Flow is a graphical programming language like Grasshopper or Dynamo, but unlike Grasshopper and Dynamo, the Flow runs in a web browser, so you can access it from anywhere. Also, you can operate on any type of data that you send to Flux, making it very powerful and flexible. So I built this flow earlier to transform SketchUp data into something that Revit can understand. So my flow has two sections. The first one over here on the left, I take a volume from SketchUp, and then I slice it at regular intervals to create the basis of my floor plate geometry, which you can see here. This is a live preview of that geometry. And then in the second part of my flow, I take this geometry and I turn it into something that Revit can understand. So I tag it with the proper attributes so Revit knows that these are floor plates and not walls or doors or windows. So now if I go over to Revit, I can pull down my building. I have the Flux plugin. I can say from Flux. I'm going to select my project. And then I'm going to select the first key, which is some metadata about this. And now I'm going to pull in a second key. And once that's received, I can see there's the building that I just designed in SketchUp divided into levels here in Revit. And what's cool is I've actually created a live link between SketchUp and Revit. So if I go back to SketchUp and make a change to my building, it will automatically show up here in Flux or in Revit. So let's do that. Okay, so I have this hexagon building, but I would rather replace it with a circular building. So I can go here, draw my building footprint, loft it to, again, 80 meters, select it, send it to Flux. I'll reuse that same key I was using earlier called massing. And now if I go back to Revit and I open up the Flux plugin, it lets me know that I have new data and I can pull it down whenever I'm ready to use it. So I'll go ahead and pull these both down, sync my data, and then I will merge. And there's my new building that I designed in SketchUp. And what's cool is this all happens under the hood. If you notice, I didn't have to even open up Flux. The data transfer, the data, and the transformation all happen automatically, which is pretty neat. Okay, so that's one example of how you might use Flux. Like I mentioned before, we have plugins for Grasshopper, Dynamo, Excel, Revit, SketchUp, and then we have 3ds Max, AutoCAD, and Google Sheets coming soon. But beyond our core platform, I wanted to show you, we have another site called Flux Labs, where we build experimental additions to our core platform. We launched this back in April and have about 20 projects here that you can explore. All you need is a Flux account. Most of these were built using our SDKs. We have a JavaScript SDK and a C# SDK, and these enable you to build extensions to the Flux platform if you so desire. So anyone can sign up for a Flux developer account. Just go to flux.io/developer and sign up. So I wanted to show you two projects from Flux Labs, the first of which is called Flux Terra. And this is a Labs app that makes it very easy to bring your building model into Google Earth. We built this with our JavaScript SDK just like 2 weeks ago, so this is hot off the presses. And the idea behind it is you can take a building model that you're storing in Flux, mark on a map where that building goes, and then with one click, you'll get a file for Google Earth. Let me get Google Earth just started up. Okay. And then let's go back to our Flux Terra app, and I will log in. And I'll select the project that I've been working with, which is called South Van Ness, or Van Ness. And in this list, you can see thumbnails of all my data keys. I'll select my building massing, then I'll move the map to select the parcel I'm interested in. So I say, okay, my building belongs on this parcel, and then just one click, and the app automatically generates a file you can look at in Google Earth. So let's go ahead and do that. And we then fly to our building site. And there's our building. And you can look at it in the context of the rest of the skyline with nice texture maps. I love Google Earth. It's a really great communication tool when you're working with your clients. So the last thing I wanted to show is another Labs app that we built with our SDK, and this is an integration with the Unity 3D engine. So Unity is a gaming engine that's probably industry standard for virtual reality. And while it's typically used for gaming, I always have thought that architecture is a really compelling use of VR. And so we've built a link for Unity in the same way that you can pull in data to SketchUp or Revit, you can pull in your data to Unity. So I'm going to select my project, and then I'll select my building. And there it is, just one click. I can walk forward and walk backwards and look around. And then I can also pull in any of my other data keys, so I'll pull in the rest of my San Francisco skyline, and now I can go around and walk around the mid-market neighborhood of San Francisco. And what's cool here is, just like with Revit and SketchUp, this is a live link, so anytime you make a change to your building model, it'll show up immediately here in Unity. Okay. Okay, so that's all I wanted to show you today. So if you want to try out our tools, just go to flux.io and sign up for an account and try out some of our onboarding tutorials. If you get stuck, we have a very active community site. here at community.flux.io. If you ask a question, you'll typically get an answer within a couple hours, either from someone at Flux or someone within the community. Also, if you have a suggestion for a piece of design or analysis software that you'd like us to integrate with, just drop us a line at hello@flux.io with your suggestion. We always love to hear from our users. Okay, well, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy using Flux.
Well, thank you, Jen. That was great. We're going to take a quick commercial break, but don't go anywhere because Jen and I are going to sit down and we'll be joined with Ted Hogan from AGSS, and we'll kind of talk about, the applications of Flux and just more on that. So also, though, real quick, if you have any questions or, comments, please feel free to leave them in the live stream. And if there's any questions that, anyone from the Built Worlds team can't answer, then, I'll go ahead and pass them over to Jen and Ted and see if they can take a hack at them.
What is the built environment? Well, you're surrounded by it right now. All the buildings, parks, the infrastructure, and the urban planning, investment, and policy that goes into creating the cities of the world. Collectively, it's the world's oldest industry. And for as long as it's been around, things haven't changed much. It's a giant sector of our economy. In 2015, the built environment accounted for $8.5 trillion. But new tech calls for new methods. It's time to move forward. At Built Worlds, we cultivate a smarter built environment and a better approach to creating and maintaining it. Through our website, live streaming network of programming, and our special written features, our mission is to push the industry forward. We do this by stimulating dialogue, facilitating connections, reaching out to future generations, and promoting a deeper understanding of the new and emerging tech applications and possibilities that empower us all. To address the challenges of our evolving built environment, we must put forth and share fresh ideas together. Watch, listen, learn. Built Worlds, building better ideas.
Welcome back to Unboxed. Here I have Jen from Flux and Ted from ASGG. I made an embarrassing mistake and said the wrong thing, but it is Adrian Smith and Gordon Gill Architecture. Thank you guys so much again for sitting down with me and being in the hot seat as we ask some of these questions.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Again, for the audience, if you have any questions, please leave them in the live stream. So if we can't get to them, then maybe Jen or Ted can help answer those. And I have my handy iPad here if you do have those. So great. So we just got finished with a great unboxing of Flux. But one of the things I heard you had mentioned was, if you and Anthony were kind of trying to work together without using Flux, it would have been previously hard to kind of work together because you liked SketchUp and he likes Revit. So can you talk more about the challenges of working with multiple platforms?
Yeah, so there are a few things. So like the SketchUp and Revit link in particular is one that was, before Flux very hard. I think it was so hard that most people just kind of would give up and not do it. So between other tools, there are a lot of homegrown solutions or plugins for Grasshopper that work well, but it's left to the user to kind of manually piece all of these things together and build kind of a custom solution out of bits and pieces from here and there. With Flux, what we're hoping to enable people to do is they just don't even have to think about it. They can just choose the tool that works best for whatever they're trying to do, and then have Flux be this underlying fabric that makes the data exchange just seamless and and transparent.
Ted, did you experience issues like that prior to your company being on Flux?
Yeah, so we primarily work in Rhino and Grasshopper, and that's where a lot of our design decisions are made, and we have a lot of staff who have been using that for years, so they're really great at it. And we've got some staff that are really starting to get good at Dynamo too, but when we wanted to do the interoperability between the two, we were looking at maybe like 8 different packages where there was this one plugin that was really good for floor plates, and another plugin that was really good for columns, and another one that was really good for curtain walls. And it was like there were 6 people in the office who kind of could really both know those and know when to use each one. And you know, what's really amazing about Flux is that it not only does it really offer the whole package, but in that working together mentality, before it would have to be one person, and it's like these 6 people, they're like the unicorns of the office, right? Like they can do everything, and they have to manage that entire they have to manage that entire workflow from beginning to, oh no, something's not working the way we want it to, let's fix it at 2 hours before the deadline, to it being in the program it needs to be in, and now, that one of those unicorns can they can take more of a managerial role as far as the data going between the programs, where they can just kind of, they can be, oh, okay, I sent the proper data there. Tell me if you downloaded it correctly. And they're not checking all that stuff. They can just hear back from these people. And, maybe someone who, they weren't in school when they went to school, Revit was what they were taught, and Dynamo is what they're getting into, and they kind of understand the basics of Grasshopper, but they're not one of our power users. They don't need to be on the Grasshopper side. They can be on the Dynamo side or the Revit side or whatever. And what I actually really like is the even stepping outside of the 3D stuff, the Excel option. We have people in our company who are they don't open up 3D programs because frankly, they shouldn't have to. They've reached that point in their career.
Spreadsheets.
Yeah, and now it's not them working separately from people, but we can use their spreadsheets, and we can, using the different programs, we can tell them, okay, we can just teach the program, read their spreadsheet this way because they organize it this way, and now instead of them having to delegate that work to someone, we're using the work that's been done once instead of it being done multiple times.
Yeah. So then how much more efficient would you say? I know you probably can't give a number to it, like in hours of time saved weekly, but how much more efficient would you say the company works now, because it is all kind of put through Flux and there's not multiple different systems that...
So yeah, I would say it's difficult to give it a number, but I can give a really good example. So being someone that tries to work with the workflows, we've been looking for more projects at the starting point rather than projects at the ending point to integrate Flux into. So we've been starting to get that way, and sometimes we start a little small. And one problem I was working on yesterday was spiral parking ramps. Really exciting. And for whatever reason, like I said, we have a history of having really strong Grasshopper users. So we've had this library of them that we've had for years, and we can do a spiral parking ramp in Grasshopper really quickly. But Revit, its geometry engine doesn't quite lend itself to that being a very quick process. And so using Flux, we were able to kind of send, okay, these are the bits and pieces of the information of the spiral ramp that we want to send over to Dynamo, had Dynamo build the ramp, alter it to make it match that, and then so now in a matter of seconds, we click run once, and in 30 seconds you get a parking ramp that normally might have taken 2 hours to build, and it's not uncommon to by the time you're an hour and a half in, have someone come by and be like, yeah, they want more parking, so change that parking ramp.
Oh,
and
no.
There go your last hour and a half of work.
So that's something I'm really excited about. Taking care of those little things that keep you from designing.
Yeah. Are those similar situations that you've...
Yeah, well, I was actually going to say that I think it's wonderful when we can save people time, but I get really excited when we actually enable workflows that were either very difficult or like nearly impossible before Flux. So an example I keep coming back to is the SketchUp to Revit workflow. Before Flux, it was very hard to do, so hard that most people just wouldn't do it. And I think there are, we hear anecdotes all the time about what people are, kind of what Flux has unlocked for them.
So then if people couldn't even, if you're saying, like a lot of people just wouldn't do it, so then what's the alternative? If you can't like work with like SketchUp and Revit together, then does that just completely like stop work, or how does that?
Yeah, a lot of what I would see is they'll take a model that's built in one program and then they'll just remodel it or start from scratch and just kind of, visually match.
Wow.
So there's a lot of wasted time and energy there. Which, as a software engineer, I'm always looking for ways to make things a little bit more efficient.
Right.
And so those are the things that get me really excited.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Okay, so we talked about, kind of what it was prior to Flux, and now going on to Flux, what would be, saying the biggest barriers to adopting the technology?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think honestly what comes to mind for me is just human busyness. I have observed in the AEC industry, it's a very deadline-driven, tight time frame industry. And, if you're faced with, hours are scarce and you're deciding whether I should try out a new piece of software that's supposedly going to help me, or I can finish like the next design iteration before I meet with a client tomorrow, what's gonna typically win out.
Right.
But typically when we've been able to get people to actually try the software, it kind of, the time spent learning it pays for itself within a very short amount of time.
Were there any barriers, for your company? I know you said that y'all were looking at like 6 or 8 different programs because they all had their perks about them, or was it like an immediate, nope, this is the immediate solution?
It breaks down more barriers. So there's always going to be that barrier of like the tech and the scripting aspect, be it visual or traditional scripting. But what's nice about Flux is, compared to some of those other packages, I really found it to be a lot more reliable. And the fact that you can change, you have the option to choose the project that you're on, the data key that you want to pull. It means that like someone like me who develops workflows, I can write one script that can be used on all projects as opposed to having to customize it to each project. And so I'll develop the script and I know for my position, I know the common bugs that they're going to run into. And so I make sure the script can make it past those first 5 bugs. And then the idea is, all right, well, we get the teams, these 10 scripts that I know are going to work really well, and then they get hooked on it. And then they start to want to learn themselves, how do we do all this stuff?
Yeah, I love that like gives you more leverage too. You can build something once and then distribute it to 10 or 20 or your whole firm.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty cool.
It's really cool.
Well, then how many companies, if you can say, have already adopted the technology?
Yeah, I can't say exactly precisely the number just for confidentiality reasons, but on our website, if you go to flux.io, you can see a listing of some of the companies we're working with, and some of the firms are small boutique firms, just a couple of people, up to firms with thousands and thousands of employees, and so the companies we work with span the whole gamut.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Including y'all as well. Well, I know this is never, talking about price point is not always the most fun, but people want to know, like, what is the pricing model for Flux?
Yeah, so we are a per user monthly subscription. Okay. The cost is $60 a month. And right now all of that's handled through our sales team. By the end of the year, we will have self-service billing in place, so you can just come to Flux and put in your payment information and go from there. But right now, just also it's worth noting that you can always go and try the tools out for free. Get a sense of how they work, if they work for you, if they solve your problems. Obviously, we don't want to force anything on anybody. They should work well for you.
Well, it seems like it does, as Ted had said, it breaks down barriers, not they aren't creating them. So that's great. I am curious about competition, like other competition. What is to stop, say a company like Autodesk from creating a plugin very similar to Flux?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I was talking about this with a couple of the folks on my team, and we were drawing the parallel of us being a little bit like Switzerland. We're just this like neutral third party who, our goal is just to make all of the existing design tools work better together. Like I mentioned before, we want to be an open platform for the AEC industry, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So, companies like Autodesk or Trimble or, some of the very, forward-looking companies in the industry certainly could build plugins, but, or, interoperability tools like we have. But, I would imagine they want to spend time on their core competencies, pushing forward Revit and SketchUp and AutoCAD and, leave interoperability to us. But I mean, it's a great question. We're a startup, and so that question keeps us on our toes, and we're always trying to figure out how to make, a more useful and delightful experience for our users.
Well, I think that's a great answer as far as, because I would assume the same thing. It's like why would AutoCAD or, someone focus on something that was kind of not helping out, but their competition or their other, other design softwares out there. So
I like to think about it as like companies like to focus on their core competency, and
which makes sense.
And it's
totally
the most efficient.
So I'm kind of curious also as to where did you get the idea for Flux, and what was your vision, or what is, if it still is the vision, for the technology? Yeah,
well, like I mentioned before, we got our start in the Google X Research Lab, and the way projects work there is the Google X leadership typically identifies a problem that they feel is like a world scale problem, and then they get a group of technologists together to propose a solution that could be executed on within like a 10-year time frame. So the problem that they brought to my team there was, urban population growth is going to, it's a massive problem. We're going to nearly double the urban population by 2050. And the way that we're designing and building buildings is very time intensive, resource intensive, and really just isn't scalable. So they didn't prescribe what our solution should be. They just said, here's a problem, what can you do? So, probably the first year of our project, we spent just talking to, hundreds and hundreds of people from, architecture through engineering, construction, owners, developers, and just kept hearing, or we really listened hard to what their pain points were. And we kept hearing things like it's a siloed industry. Things are, there's a lot of changes that happen midstream. So, pretty early on, our vision was to be this kind of underlying, kind of fundamental open platform for the industry. And I think that we are, the interoperability tools that we've built so far are kind of this like fundamental base layer for that. If we didn't build those, like I was saying before, we'd be forced to like rebuild the entire ecosystem, which is like clearly a terrible idea. So we want to integrate with best-in-class tools and make it very easy to move very fluidly between different tools that people use for designing buildings.
So if you could say if there was like a particular dream that you like, what would be the dream of the people who gave you the problem? What would be their dream solution?
Yeah. So a term or an analogy I use, or I love to use, is this idea of building seeds, where just like a seed has all of the DNA and rules in it that tell it how to grow into a tree. Like if you think of that, and I apply it to the idea of buildings, and that building seed is an application that has all of the rules and analyses built in, so that you can basically design a building by planting it in a location. So it has all the rules for how to design its cores and structural system, the facade. It knows how to run energy models and structural models, and everything kind of responds to each other. So say you make a change to your structural grid, how can your parking layout or underground parking layout automatically respond to it. So this idea of like a fully integrated design process is kind of the dream that is alive and well at Flux. And right now we're in kind of step one of that.
Well, we look forward to the rest of the steps to that, definitely.
Thanks.
Does that sound something, I mean, does that sound like a great vision to have?
Yeah, I mean, everything with Flux so far has been really great. And actually, you mentioned the thing about the Unity VR stuff. It's funny because we were, like the first day that we started messing around with Flux, we were like, you know, what would be interesting is if we could get real stuff streaming into Unity, because we've been doing a lot of VR work and it's really great, but it's kind of hard to get live stuff in there. So that got me really excited. Is it on the labs already, or?
Yeah, well, this one is like hot off the presses from this weekend. I can get you early access.
Yes.
I can see where maybe that tip came from. You know how you said drop a line at this?
Yeah.
Maybe one of the tips came from somebody on your team.
Yeah.
Who knows? Well, we did have one question come in from the live stream, and I believe you did kind of touch on this, but it asks just what Flux has lined up for the future, and I think you had kind of touched on that. But if you could just kind of repeat that. And
Yeah, so in the short term, we have new plugins coming for Google Sheets. That should be just within the next few weeks. We're working on an AutoCAD plugin and a 3ds Max plugin. We are also making improvements to our SDKs. We have, like I mentioned before, a JavaScript SDK and a C# SDK. So we're making small additions and improvements there based on feedback from our early users. And then another exciting area is we're continuing to extend the labs part of our site, Flux Labs. And so here we're adding small apps that are very purpose specific and they solve one problem really well, like the site Extractor is very good at extracting site context, or Fluxterra is very good at integrating with Google Earth. So we have a queue of other apps that we're working on and should be coming out in the next few months.
okay, well, great. Well, thank you for answering our questions. Ted, thank you for joining us and giving us that user perspective. That's extremely helpful for viewers and just us to get that perspective. Thank you guys, as always, for tuning in for this episode of Unboxed. To catch more Built Worlds programming, be sure to subscribe to our channel, and to see what else we're up to, go to builtworlds.com. If you thought that Flux, and it seems like it probably could if you're in this industry, could help you out, go to Flux, as Jen said, flux.io. And that's all that I have for today, so thank you all.